Elena Martinez pushed her cleaning cart through the back entrance of the Whitmore Concert Hall, just like she had done every Tuesday and Friday evening for the past 15 years. The wheels squeaked slightly as she made her way down the familiar hallway, passing framed photographs of famous musicians who had graced the stage over the decades. She knew every face on that wall by now, even though she'd never actually seen any of them perform live. Working as a janitor at one of the city's most prestigious concert venues wasn't exactly what Elena had dreamed about as a little girl. But life had a way of taking you down paths you never planned for. At 42 years old, she had made peace with her reality. The pay was decent, the work was honest, and most importantly, it was steady. In a world where nothing seemed certain anymore, steady was worth its weight in gold. Elena had grown up in a small apartment on the east side of town, the youngest of 4 children. Her parents had immigrated from Mexico with nothing but hope and determination, working multiple jobs to keep food on the table. There was never money for extras. No dance classes, no summer camps, and definitely no music lessons. But Elena had always been drawn to music in a way she couldn't quite explain. It was like there was something inside her that came alive whenever she heard a melody. When she was 8 years old, their neighbor Mrs. Chen had an old electronic keyboard that she kept in her living room. It was gathering dust because her own children had lost interest in it years ago. Elena would sometimes hear it through the thin walls when Mrs. Chen played old songs from her childhood in Taiwan. One day, Mrs. Chen caught Elena standing outside her door just listening. Instead of shooing her away, the elderly woman invited her in and let her touch the keys. That was the moment everything changed. Elena's fingers found the keys like they had been waiting for them her whole life. Mrs. Chen started letting her come over 3 times a week after school. She taught Elena basic songs, showed her where middle C was and how to read simple sheet music. But Elena learned most of it by ear. She would listen to songs on the radio or on television, and then try to recreate them on Mrs. Chen's keyboard. Sometimes she got it right, sometimes she didn't, but she never got tired of trying. For 3 beautiful years, Elena played that keyboard whenever she could. She got pretty good at it too. Mrs. Chen would smile and nod, saying Elena had a gift. But then Mrs. Chen's health declined, and she had to move in with her daughter across the state. The keyboard went with her, and just like that, Elena's music lessons were over. She tried to keep playing wherever she could. At school, she would sneak into the music room during lunch and practice on the piano there, until a teacher would inevitably find her and kick her out. By the time she was in high school, life got busier. She had to get a job to help her family make ends meet. College was never really an option, not with the way things were at home. Her father had gotten injured at his construction job, and suddenly Elena's dreams had to be put on hold. Actually, not on hold, put away entirely. She got married young to someone who seemed steady, had 2 kids, and then got divorced when those kids were still small. Being a single mom meant making choices every single day about what was necessary and what was just a dream. Piano lessons for herself, that was a dream. Keeping the lights on and food in her children's bellies, that was necessary. The choice wasn't hard, even if it hurt. Her kids were grown now. Daniel was working as a mechanic in another state, and her daughter Sophia was finishing nursing school. Elena was proud of them, prouder than she had words to express. They had both turned out good despite all the struggles. That was enough. That had to be enough. But here's the thing about dreams. They don't really die no matter how deep you bury them. They just wait. Every evening when Elena cleaned the Whitmore Concert Hall, she would save the main auditorium for last. She would vacuum the red velvet seats, wipe down the armrests, and sweep the aisles. But she always moved slowly when she got near the stage. That's where the piano sat, a magnificent Steinway grand piano, black and gleaming under the stage lights. Even when the lights were dim, it seemed to glow. Elena never touched it. She was allowed to dust around it, to clean the stage floor near it, but the instrument itself was off limits. Only authorized personnel, the venue manager had told her very clearly during her first week on the job. These instruments are worth hundreds of thousands of dollars, he had said. One wrong move and you could damage something irreplaceable. So Elena kept her distance. But she always looked at it. Sometimes, when she was absolutely certain she was alone, she would stand close to it and just imagine what it would feel like to play something that beautiful. Her fingers would twitch at her sides, remembering patterns and movements from decades ago. This particular Friday evening, Elena arrived at the concert hall at her usual time, 5:30. There had been a performance earlier that afternoon, and she could still smell the faint scent of perfume and cologne lingering in the air. The audience had left behind their usual mess of programs, candy wrappers, and the occasional forgotten scarf or glove. She went through her routine, starting with the restrooms, then the lobby, then the upper seating areas. By the time she reached the main auditorium, it was nearly 7 o'clock. The building was quiet. Too quiet. Usually by this time there would be sounds of people preparing for the evening performance or rehearsing. But tonight the schedule board had shown nothing planned until tomorrow afternoon. Elena pushed her cart to the side of the stage and began her cleaning routine. But something felt different tonight. Maybe it was the complete silence, or maybe it was the way the stage lights had been left on low, creating this warm, almost inviting glow. The piano seemed to be calling to her in a way it never had before. She told herself to focus on her work. Sweep the stage. Don't think about it. But her feet carried her closer to the instrument anyway. She stood beside it, looking at the keys. They were perfectly clean, perfectly white and black, perfectly untouched. When was the last time she had actually played a real piano? Not an electronic keyboard, but a real acoustic piano. She couldn't even remember. 20 years? Maybe more. Her hand reached out almost on its own. Just one key, she thought, just to hear what it sounds like. Her finger pressed down on middle C, and the note rang out pure and clear through the empty hall. It was the most beautiful sound she had heard in years. Before Elena could talk herself out of it, she sat down on the bench. Just for a moment, she told herself, just to remember what it felt like. Her hands found their position on the keys, and suddenly she wasn't 42-year-old Elena Martinez, cleaning lady, single mother, and forgotten dreamer. She was 8 years old again, sitting at Mrs. Chen's keyboard, full of possibility and hope. She began to play. Elena's fingers moved across the keys like they were greeting an old friend. The muscle memory was still there, buried under years of dishes, laundry, and scrubbing floors, but still there. She started with something simple, a melody she used to play at Mrs. Chen's apartment. The notes came out a little shaky at first, but then they began to flow. She closed her eyes and let herself get lost in it. For these few stolen moments, nothing else existed. Not the bills waiting at home, not the ache in her lower back from bending over to clean all day, not the worry about whether Sophia would be able to afford her final semester of nursing school. Just the music. Just this feeling of coming home to a part of herself she'd locked away for so long. The song shifted into something else, something she'd heard on the radio last week and had been humming while she worked. Her hands found the melody without her having to think about it, adding little flourishes here and there, making it her own. This was what she'd always loved about playing. You could take something that already existed and make it say something new. Make it say what was in your heart when you didn't have the words. She was so absorbed in the music that she didn't hear the door at the back of the auditorium open. She didn't hear the footsteps coming down the aisle. She didn't hear anything except the piano until a voice cut through the air like a knife. "Excuse me, what do you think you're doing?" Elena's hands froze on the keys, the last note hanging in the air. Her eyes snapped open and her heart jumped into her throat. Standing in the aisle were 5 young people, probably in their early 20s, all carrying instrument cases and looking at her with expressions ranging from confusion to amusement. Behind them stood a woman in an expensive-looking navy blazer and pearl earrings, her arms crossed and her face set in a look of complete disapproval. I'm sorry, I was just..." Elena stammered, standing up so quickly she almost knocked over the bench. Her face burned hot with embarrassment. "You were just what?" the woman in the blazer said, walking toward the stage with sharp, purposeful steps. "Playing an instrument that costs more than most people make in 5 years? Touching property that you have absolutely no authorization to touch?" "I didn't mean any harm," Elena said, her voice coming out smaller than she wanted it to. "I was cleaning and You just decided to act like you belong somewhere you don't," one of the young women in the group said. She had long blonde hair pulled back in a perfect ponytail and was wearing clothes that probably cost more than Elena's entire month's rent. "That's literally so weird," the others laughed. One of them, a young man with trendy glasses and an expensive watch, was holding up his phone. Elena realized with a sinking feeling that he was filming her. "Please don't," she said, reaching out a hand. "Please, I'll just go." "Oh, this is definitely going online," the young man said, grinning. "The cleaning lady thinks she's a concert pianist." "This is gold." "Tyler, stop it," another girl said, but she was smiling too. They were all smiling except for the woman in the blazer who just looked angry. Elena felt like she was shrinking. She wanted to disappear, to sink into the floor and never be seen again. This was exactly why she never took chances, why she never let herself want things that weren't meant for people like her. Because this was what happened when you stepped out of your place. You got reminded, usually in the most humiliating way possible, that you didn't belong. "Do you have any idea how serious this is?" the woman said, now standing at the edge of the stage, looking up at Elena like she was something unpleasant she'd found on the bottom of her shoe. "This is a Steinway Model D. It requires climate control, regular maintenance, and should only be touched by trained professionals. The oils from your hands alone could damage the finish." "I washed my hands," Elena said quietly, but even she could hear how pathetic it sounded. "That's not the point," the woman snapped. "The point is that you, as a member of the custodial staff, have absolutely no business being anywhere near this instrument. This is for artists, for people who have dedicated their entire lives to their craft, not for someone who mops floors." Each word landed like a slap. Elena felt tears starting to burn behind her eyes, but she refused to let them fall. Not here. Not in front of these people who were looking at her like she was nothing. "Mrs. Whitmore is right," the blonde girl said. "Like, no offense, but this isn't a toy. This is serious music. You can't just come in here and mess around on it because you're bored or whatever." "I wasn't messing around," Elena said, and immediately regretted it. Defending herself would only make this worse. "Oh, really?" Mrs. Whitmore said, her eyebrows raised. "So you have formal training then? A degree from a conservatory? Years of study with a qualified instructor?" Elena shook her head, staring at the floor. "That's what I thought," Mrs. Whitmore said. "This hall has standards. These students," she gestured to the group behind her, "have worked incredibly hard to earn the privilege of performing here. They practice for hours every single day. They've invested thousands of dollars and countless hours into their education, and you think you can just sit down and play around on a whim?" "I'm sorry," Elena whispered. "I really am. I didn't think anyone would be here tonight." The schedule said. "The schedule doesn't matter," Mrs. Whitmore interrupted. "What matters is that you violated the trust that's been placed in you. You were hired to clean, not to pretend you're something you're not." Elena nodded, moving toward her cleaning cart at the side of the stage. She just wanted to leave now. She wanted to get out of this building and never come back. Maybe she could call in sick for a few weeks until this blew over. Maybe she could ask to be transferred to cleaning the administrative offices instead of the auditorium. But in her hurry to leave, her foot caught on the edge of her cart. The whole thing tipped over, sending spray bottles, rags, and cleaning supplies clattering across the stage floor. The noise echoed through the entire hall, and Elena felt what was left of her dignity shatter along with it. The students burst out laughing. The young man with the phone was definitely still recording, zooming in on Elena as she scrambled to pick up the scattered supplies. Her hands shaking so badly she kept dropping things. "Oh my God. This keeps getting better," she heard one of them say. "Someone needs to put this on TikTok," another voice added. Elena gathered up the last of her supplies, shoving them back into the cart with no regard for organization. She just needed to get out. Her face was wet now, and she realized the tears were falling whether she wanted them to or not. "I'll be reporting this to building management," Mrs. Whitmore called after her as Elena pushed her cart toward the exit. "You can be absolutely certain there will be consequences for this." Elena didn't respond. She couldn't. If she opened her mouth, she was afraid she might start sobbing, and she'd already given them enough entertainment for one night. She pushed through the door and into the hallway, her cart's squeaky wheel sounding abnormally loud in the silence. Behind her, she could hear the students still laughing, still talking about what had just happened, making jokes at her expense, probably already posting that video online for the whole world to see. Elena made it to the supply closet before she let herself cry for real. She stood there among the mops and buckets, her shoulders shaking, feeling like the most foolish person in the world. What had she been thinking? That she could just play piano like nothing had changed? Like 20 years of life hadn't happened? Like she was still that little girl with dreams and possibilities? She was 42 years old. She was a janitor, and she had just learned, in the most painful way possible, that some dreams aren't meant for some people. The sooner she remembered that, the better off she'd be. But even as she told herself this, even as she wiped her tears and tried to pull herself together, a small voice in the back of her mind whispered something different. It whispered that those people hadn't heard what she could really do. They'd stopped her before the music could speak for itself, and maybe, just maybe, that voice said, they were wrong about her. But Elena pushed that voice away. Hope was dangerous. Hope got you hurt. She'd learned that lesson now. She wouldn't forget it again. Elena stayed in the supply closet for about 10 minutes, trying to pull herself together. She splashed cold water on her face from the utility sink and took deep breaths until her hands stopped shaking. She still had work to finish, and she couldn't afford to lose this job, no matter how much she wanted to walk out and never come back. She pushed her cart back toward the main hallway, keeping her head down and hoping she wouldn't run into anyone, especially not those students or Mrs. Whitmore. The thought of facing them again made her stomach twist into knots. "Excuse me, miss?" Elena's heart sank. She stopped but didn't turn around, gripping the handle of her cart tighter. "Please," she thought. "Please just let me be. I don't mean to bother you," the voice continued. It was a man's voice, older, with a gentle quality that made Elena turn around despite herself. Standing a few feet away was an elderly man, probably in his 70s, wearing a well-tailored gray suit and carrying a leather briefcase. He had kind eyes behind wire-rimmed glasses and a calm, unhurried presence about him. Elena recognized him vaguely. She'd seen him around the concert hall a few times over the years, always dressed nicely, always polite when he passed by. "I'm sorry," Elena said quickly, wiping at her eyes again. "I need to finish my work. If Mrs. Whitmore sent you to—" "No one sent me," the man said, holding up a hand. "Actually, I wanted to talk to you about what I just witnessed in the auditorium." Elena felt her stomach drop. He'd seen everything. The humiliation, the tears, all of it. "I'm really sorry about that. I know I shouldn't have touched the piano. It won't happen again." "That's not what I wanted to talk about," he said, taking a step closer. "I wanted to talk about your playing." Elena blinked, confused. "My playing? I only heard a few phrases before those young people interrupted you, but what I heard was remarkable." He tilted his head slightly, studying her face. "Where did you study?" "I didn't," Elena said, shifting uncomfortably. "I mean, I had a neighbor who showed me some basics when I was a kid, but that's it. I mostly just figured things out on my own." The man's eyebrows raised. "You're self-taught? Is that what you call it? I always just called it messing around." Elena tried to smile, but it felt wrong on her face after what had just happened. "Look, I appreciate you being nice, but I really should get back to work. I'm already in enough trouble as it is. What's your name?" the man asked. Elena Martinez." "Elena," he repeated, like he was testing how it sounded. "My name is Raymond Harrison. I'm a pianist." "Oh," Elena said, not sure what else to say. The name sounded familiar, but she couldn't quite place it. She didn't exactly keep up with the classical music world. "I've been playing piano for 62 years, Mr. Harrison continued. "I've performed in concert halls all over the world. I've taught at prestigious music schools and worked with some of the most talented musicians of our time. And in all those years, do you know what I've learned?" Elena shook her head. "That real talent, genuine musicality, has nothing to do with degrees or expensive lessons or the right connections. It comes from somewhere deeper, somewhere that can't be taught." He paused. "You have that, Elena. I could hear it in those few notes you played." Elena felt tears threatening again, but these were different from the ones before. "You're just being kind." "I'm being honest," Mr. Harrison said firmly. "Those people in there, they heard you playing and immediately dismissed you because of who you are, what you do for a living. They didn't actually listen to the music. They just saw a cleaning lady who didn't belong." "Maybe they were right," Elena said quietly. "Maybe I don't belong." "That's ridiculous," Mr. Harrison said with more force than she expected. "Elena, would you do something for me? Would you play for me? Really play? Not just a few measures before getting interrupted. Now?" Elena looked around nervously. "I can't. Mrs. Whitmore said she's reporting me." "If I go back in there—" "Not in the auditorium," Mr. Harrison said. "There's a practice room down this hallway. Small piano, nothing fancy, but it's quiet and private. No one will bother us there." Elena hesitated. Every sensible part of her brain was screaming at her to say no, to finish her work and go home and try to forget this whole disaster of an evening. But there was another part, that small voice that had whispered to her in the supply closet that wanted to say yes. "Why?" she asked. "Why do you care?" Mr. Harrison smiled. Because I've spent my entire life around music and musicians, and I know genuine talent when I hear it, even if it's only for a few seconds. And because, he added more softly, I know what it's like to be told you don't belong somewhere. Something in his tone made Elena look at him more closely. There was a story there, she could tell. Pain that he understood from experience, not just sympathy. Okay, she heard herself say, but just one song. And then I really do need to finish my work. Mr. Harrison's face lit up. One song is all I'm asking. He led her down the hallway to a small practice room she'd cleaned hundreds of times but never really paid attention to. Inside was an upright piano, much smaller and older than the grand Steinway on the main stage, but still beautiful in its own way. Elena sat down on the bench, her heart pounding. Her hands were shaking again, but for a different reason now. Mr. Harrison settled into a chair in the corner, his briefcase resting against his leg, waiting patiently. I don't know what to play, Elena admitted. I never learned pieces properly, not the famous ones everyone knows. I just play what comes to me. Then play what comes to you, Mr. Harrison said simply. Elena took a deep breath and placed her hands on the keys. She closed her eyes and let herself drift back to a memory. Sunday mornings at her little church across town, the one she'd been going to since her kids were small. She used to play there sometimes during the early service when their regular pianist was sick. Nobody minded that she didn't have formal training. They just cared that the music helped them feel closer to God. She started with a hymn, something traditional and simple, but then her hands began to wander. They added runs and flourishes that weren't in any hymn book. The melody shifted and changed, becoming something that was part gospel, part blues, part something she couldn't name. Her fingers found patterns that told stories about struggle and hope, about raising kids on her own and wondering how she'd pay rent, about watching her babies grow up and leave and feeling proud and lonely all at once. The music swelled and softened, building to places that ached and then resolving into something that felt like peace. She played about loneliness and resilience, about dreams deferred but not dead, about finding beauty in ordinary moments like sunshine through a window, or her daughter's laugh on the phone. When the last note faded, Elena opened her eyes. She'd forgotten where she was, forgotten everything except the music. Now reality came rushing back and she felt suddenly self-conscious. She turned to look at Mr. Harrison, expecting polite praise or maybe disappointment that she hadn't played something more proper, more technical, but the old man was wiping his eyes. He stood up slowly, walked over to the piano and just looked at her for a long moment. Elena, he said, his voice thick with emotion. That was extraordinary. It wasn't anything special, Elena said automatically. I was just... Stop, Mr. Harrison said gently but firmly. Stop diminishing yourself. What you just played had more heart, more genuine feeling than most of the technically perfect performances I hear on that stage out there. He sat down on the bench beside her. Do you know what music is supposed to do? Elena shook her head. It's supposed to make people feel something real. It's supposed to connect us to ourselves and to each other. All the training in the world, all the perfect technique doesn't mean anything if there's no soul in it. He gestured toward the door, toward the auditorium beyond. Those students out there, they play notes on a page. You play life. Do you understand the difference? Elena felt something crack open inside her chest. I wanted to learn properly, she said quietly. When I was young, but there was never money for lessons and then there was never time, and after a while it just seemed too late. It's not too late, Mr. Harrison said. Elena, I'm here tonight because I'm playing at a charity gala tomorrow evening, a fundraiser for the arts, and we just had one of our performers cancel due to illness. He paused. I want you to play. Elena's eyes widened. What? Oh no, I couldn't possibly. You could and you should. Mr. Harrison, I appreciate this, I really do, but I'm a janitor. I'm not a performer. I don't have proper clothes or training or... You have something better than all of that, he interrupted. You have a gift? And tomorrow night you're going to share it. Elena stared at Mr. Harrison like he'd just suggested she fly to the moon. You can't be serious. I've never been more serious about anything in my life, he said, his eyes steady and certain. Mr. Harrison, Elena stood up from the piano bench, needing to put some distance between herself and this impossible idea. Do you know what just happened out there? I was humiliated, laughed at. Mrs. Whitmore is probably calling my supervisor right now. And you want me to get up on that stage in front of hundreds of people? Yes, he said simply. But why? Elena's voice cracked. Why would you do this? You don't even know me. I know your music, Mr. Harrison said, and I know that what happened out there was wrong. Those people judged you based on your uniform and your job title, not on your ability. They didn't even give you a chance to show them what you could do. Maybe they were right not to, Elena said, wrapping her arms around herself. I'm not trained. I don't know the proper pieces. I'd probably mess everything up and embarrass both of us. Or, Mr. Harrison said, standing up and walking over to her, you could show them what real music sounds like. You could show them that talent doesn't come with a price tag or a diploma. You could show them they were wrong. Elena felt something stir in her chest, something that felt dangerously like hope. I'm scared. Good, Mr. Harrison said. Every performer worth anything is scared before they play. Fear means you care. It means it matters, he paused. Elena, I'm 74 years old. I've seen a lot in this industry. I've seen talented people waste their gifts because they were too afraid to try. And I've seen mediocre musicians succeed because they had confidence and connections. The system isn't fair. But every once in a while, someone comes along who reminds us why music matters. I think you could be that person. What if I freeze? Elena asked. What if my hands shake so bad I can't even play? What if everyone laughs again? Then at least you tried, Mr. Harrison said gently. At least you didn't let fear win. At least you didn't spend the rest of your life wondering what might have happened if you'd been brave enough to say yes. Elena closed her eyes. She thought about her daughter Sophia, working so hard to become a nurse, taking risks every day to chase her dreams. She thought about all the times she'd told her kids that they could be anything they wanted to be if they worked hard enough. But had she believed that for herself? Or had she given up on her own dreams so long ago that she'd forgotten what it felt like to want something badly enough to risk failure? Okay, she whispered, opening her eyes. I'll do it. Mr. Harrison's face broke into the biggest smile she'd seen all night. Really? I must be out of my mind, Elena said, but she was almost smiling too. When is it? Tomorrow evening, 7 o'clock. We'll need to figure out what you're going to play, and we'll need to get you something appropriate to wear. He pulled out his phone. Give me your number. I'll have my assistant coordinate everything. The next 24 hours passed in a blur that felt like a dream. Mr. Harrison's assistant, an efficient woman named Patricia, showed up at Elena's small apartment the next morning with 3 different dresses for her to choose from. They were all beautiful, more beautiful than anything Elena had ever owned. Mr. Harrison wants you to feel comfortable, Patricia said, hanging the dresses carefully on Elena's bedroom door, but also to look the part. First impressions matter. Elena chose a deep burgundy dress that was elegant but not too fancy. It made her feel like someone who belonged on a stage, even if she wasn't entirely sure she did. Patricia also brought news that made Elena's stomach drop. You should know that Mrs. Whitmore and her students will be at the gala. They're performing in the first half of the program. You'll be going on in the second half. Of course they would be there. The universe wasn't going to make this easy. Elena spent the afternoon practicing at the small keyboard she'd bought years ago at a garage sale. It wasn't much, just a cheap electronic thing that barely worked anymore, but it was all she had. She played through the piece she'd decided on, the one she'd played for Mr. Harrison, letting her hands find the patterns and rhythms until they felt natural again. Her phone rang around 3 o'clock. It was her daughter Sophia. Mom, you sound weird, Sophia said. What's going on? Elena hesitated, then told her everything. The whole story poured out, touching the piano, the humiliation, Mr. Harrison, the gala tonight. There was silence on the other end of the line for a long moment. Then Sophia said, Mom, do you know how many times growing up I watched you clean other people's houses and buildings while you told me I could be anything I wanted? Do you know how many times I wanted to tell you that you could be anything too? Sophia, you're doing this, Mom. You're getting up on that stage and you're going to blow everyone away. And I'm going to be in the audience watching because there's no way I'm missing this. You have classes tomorrow, Elena protested. I'm skipping them, Sophia said firmly. This is more important. I'll drive in tonight and I'll be there. End of discussion. By the time Elena arrived at the concert hall that evening, her hands were shaking so badly she could barely hold her purse. Patricia met her at the stage entrance and led her to a small dressing room. The burgundy dress fit perfectly, and Patricia helped her with her hair and a little makeup. "You look beautiful," Patricia said. "Mr. Harrison is already here. He'll introduce you when it's time." Elena nodded, not trusting herself to speak. She could hear music coming from the auditorium. The gala had started. She peeked through a gap in the curtain and saw the audience. There had to be at least 500 people out there, all dressed in expensive clothes, all looking cultured and sophisticated. These were the kind of people who went to charity galas. The kind of people who knew the difference between Mozart and Beethoven, who had opinions about conductors and composers, and there, in the third row, she saw Mrs. Whitmore and her students, all dressed formally and looking completely at ease. They belonged here. Elena was just pretending. She heard voices in the hallway outside her dressing room and recognized one of them. It was Tyler, the student who'd been filming yesterday. "I still can't believe Harrison is serious about this," Tyler was saying. "Did you see they added a mystery performer to the program?" "It's probably someone from out of town," another voice responded. "No way it's that cleaning lady." "God, I hope not," Mrs. Whitmore's voice cut in. "That would be absolutely mortifying. For everyone involved. The woman has no training, no credentials. She'll freeze up there or play something completely inappropriate. I tried to talk Raymond out of it, but he wouldn't listen." "If it is her, I'm definitely recording it again," Tyler said. And they all laughed. "That video from yesterday already has like 50,000 views." Elena felt sick. They'd posted it online. Of course they had. Her humiliation was entertainment for strangers on the internet. She sat down heavily in the chair, staring at herself in the mirror. What was she doing? This was a mistake. A huge, terrible mistake. She should leave right now, just walk out and save herself the embarrassment. There was a soft knock on the door. "Come in," Elena said quietly. Mr. Harrison entered, looking distinguished in his tuxedo. He took one look at her face and knew. "You heard them?" Elena nodded. "They posted that video. Everyone's already seen me at my worst. And now I'm going to go out there and prove them right." Mr. Harrison pulled up a chair and sat down beside her. "Elena, can I tell you a story?" She shrugged. "When I was 23 years old, I was playing a concert in Chicago. Important performance, important people in the audience. And halfway through Rachmaninoff's second piano concerto, I forgot the music. Just completely blanked." He shook his head at the memory. "I sat there at the piano, hands frozen, absolutely terrified. The orchestra was waiting. The audience was waiting. And I was sure my career was over." "What did you do?" Elena asked. "I improvised," he said. "I played something that I hoped sounded close to Rachmaninoff until my memory kicked back in. It wasn't perfect. It wasn't even close to perfect. But I finished. And you know what? Some people noticed and some people didn't. The ones who mattered understood that mistakes happen. That being human happens. But you were trained," Elena said. "You belong there. And you belong here," Mr. Harrison said firmly. "Not because of where you went to school or who your teachers were, but because you have something to say through your music. Those people out there, they're going to judge you no matter what. Some of them have already decided you're going to fail, so why not prove them wrong?" Elena looked at him, then back at her reflection. She thought about Sophia driving all the way here to watch her mother do something brave. She thought about 8-year-old Elena, playing Mrs. Chen's keyboard with so much joy and hope. She thought about all the years she'd spent convincing herself that dreams were for other people. "Okay," she said, standing up. "Let's do this." Mr. Harrison smiled and offered her his arm. "That's my girl." They walked together down the hallway toward the stag. The entrance. Elena could hear applause. The previous performer had finished. Mr. Harrison would go out first to introduce her, and then it would be her turn. He squeezed her hand. "Remember, just play from your heart. That's all you need to do." Then he walked out onto the stage, and Elena heard his voice amplified through the sound system. "Ladies and gentlemen, for our final performance this evening, I'd like to introduce someone very special. Her name is Elena Martinez, and she's going to play something I think you'll find truly remarkable." Elena took a deep breath. This was it. No going back now. She stepped out from behind the curtain and walked onto the stage. The lights were brighter than Elena expected. Walking across that stage felt like walking through a dream or maybe a nightmare. She couldn't quite tell which. Every step echoed in her ears, competing with the sound of her own heartbeat. 500 pairs of eyes watching her. 500 people who had paid good money to hear trained musicians, not a 42-year-old janitor who'd learned piano from a neighbor's keyboard. She could see Mrs. Whitmore in the third row, her face a mixture of shock and something that looked like second-hand embarrassment. The students beside her were whispering to each other, and Tyler had his phone out again. Of course he did. But then Elena spotted Sophia standing at the back of the auditorium because she'd arrived too late to get a seat. Her daughter's face was filled with pride and love and belief. Sophia gave her a small nod, and Elena felt something steady inside her chest. She reached the piano, that same beautiful Steinway she'd touched yesterday. The bench was exactly where she'd left it. She sat down slowly, adjusting her burgundy dress, buying herself a few extra seconds. Her hands were trembling as she placed them on her lap. The auditorium was completely silent, waiting, judging. Elena closed her eyes and took a deep breath. She thought about Mrs. Chen, who had been kind enough to share music with a little girl who had nothing. She thought about all those Sunday mornings at church, playing for people who didn't care if every note was perfect. They just wanted to feel something real. She thought about her kids, about raising them alone, about all the nights she'd cried herself to sleep wondering if she was doing enough, being enough. And then she placed her hands on the keys. The first notes came out soft and tentative, like she was asking a question. A simple melody, nothing fancy, nothing that would impress the music scholars in the audience. But then her hands began to move with more confidence. The melody grew, shifted, became something that spoke without words. She played about struggle, about working multiple jobs and still coming up short at the end of the month, about the weight of responsibility and the fear of failing the people who depended on you. Her left hand laid down a rhythm that felt like footsteps, like walking the same path day after day, doing what needed to be done even when you were tired to your bones. Then the music changed. It lightened, lifted, became something that felt like those rare moments of joy that break through the hard days. A child's laughter, a sunny morning, the first sip of coffee when you finally sit down. Her fingers danced across the keys, finding melodies she hadn't planned, hadn't practiced. They just came from somewhere deep inside, from all those years of feeling and observing and living. She wove in pieces of hymns she'd played at church, but transformed them, made them her own. Mixed in some blues, some jazz, some rhythms that came from her parents' heritage and the music she'd grown up hearing through apartment walls. It all flowed together into something that was completely, authentically hers. The auditorium had gone so quiet that Elena could hear her own breathing between phrases. She didn't open her eyes. She couldn't. If she saw their faces, saw their judgment, she might lose her courage. So she kept her eyes closed and let the music tell her story. She played about loss, about her divorce and the shame she'd felt, like somehow she'd failed at the most important job a person could have, about watching her kids struggle and not being able to fix everything for them no matter how much she wanted to. The piano seemed to cry with her, the notes bending and breaking in ways that felt almost like tears. But then, just when the sadness threatened to overwhelm everything, the music found hope again. Because that's what life was, wasn't it? Sadness and joy all mixed together, sometimes in the same moment. She played about resilience, about getting up every morning and trying again, about the pride she felt watching Sophia study nursing, about the day Daniel called to tell her he'd gotten promoted at the auto shop, about small victories that felt huge when you'd worked so hard for them. Her hands flew across the keys now, building to something bigger. The music swelled, filling every corner of the concert hall. She wasn't thinking anymore, wasn't worrying about technique or whether she was playing the right notes. She was just feeling and letting those feelings pour out through her fingers. The final section of her piece was about dreams, about how they never really die even when you bury them, about second chances and the courage it takes to try again when you've been knocked down. The music climbed higher and higher, reaching for something beautiful and just barely out of reach, and then, in the final measures, it found it. The last chord rang out pure and clear, hanging in the air like a promise. Elena held the sustain pedal down, letting the sound fade naturally into silence. Only then did she open her eyes. For a moment, nothing happened. The auditorium was completely still. Elena. His heart sank. They'd hated it. She'd made a fool of herself again, just like Mrs. Whitmore had predicted. But then someone started clapping. Just one person at first. Elena looked up and saw Mr. Harrison standing, applauding with tears running down his face. Then Sophia was clapping too, and then someone else, and then suddenly the entire auditorium erupted. People were standing, applauding, and the sound was thunderous. Elena stood up from the piano shakily, not quite believing what was happening. She could see people wiping their eyes. A woman in the front row was openly crying. The applause just kept going, wave after wave of it. She looked at the third row and saw Mrs. Whitmore standing too, clapping slowly, her face completely transformed. The superiority was gone. The judgment was gone. She just looked stunned and maybe a little humbled. Tyler had put his phone away. They were all clapping. Mr. Harrison walked onto the stage and took Elena's hand, raising it in the air. The applause somehow got even louder. He leaned over and whispered in her ear, "I told you." Elena felt tears streaming down her face, but they were good tears this time. Happy tears. She looked out at all these people, these strangers who had heard her story without her speaking a single word, and she felt seen in a way she never had before. After what felt like forever, the applause finally began to die down. People started making their way to the reception area, but many of them stopped by the stage first, wanting to speak to her. An older gentleman told her it was the most moving performance he'd heard in 40 years of attending concerts. A young woman said Elena's music had made her think of her own mother and all the sacrifices she'd made. Mrs. Whitmore approached, her students trailing behind her, looking uncomfortable. Elena's instinct was to tense up, but Mrs. Whitmore's face stopped her. "Miss Martinez," Mrs. Whitmore said, her voice quiet, "I owe you an apology. A profound one. What I said yesterday was cruel and wrong. I judged you based on assumptions, not on your ability. What you just did up there." She paused, seeming to struggle for words. "That was artistry. Real artistry. I was wrong about you, and I'm sorry." Tyler stepped forward too. "I deleted that video," he said. "The one from yesterday. I shouldn't have posted it. It wasn't right." Elena didn't know what to say. She'd imagined a lot of possible outcomes for this evening, but this wasn't one of them. "Thank you," she managed. "I appreciate that." Sophia pushed through the small crowd and threw her arms around her mother. "Mom, you were incredible. I'm so proud of you I could burst." Mr. Harrison appeared with an elegant woman Elena didn't recognize. "Elena, this is Catherine Rodriguez. She runs the Henderson Foundation for the Arts." The woman shook Elena's hand warmly. "Miss Martinez, I would like to talk with you about a scholarship. We support adult learners who show exceptional promise. What I heard tonight was beyond promising. I think with some formal training to supplement your natural talent, you could do remarkable things." I don't know what to say," Elena said. "Say you'll think about it," Catherine said, handing her a business card. "Call me next week. We'll talk details." The rest of the evening passed in a blur. More people wanting to meet her, more compliments, more opportunities being mentioned. Someone from a local community center asked if she'd be interested in teaching piano to underprivileged kids. A music blogger wanted to do a story about her. It was almost midnight by the time Elena and Sophia finally left the concert hall. They sat in the parking lot for a moment, neither of them quite ready to drive away. "Mom, your whole life just changed," Sophia said quietly. Elena thought about that. Tomorrow she'd still be a janitor at the Whitmore Concert Hall, at least for now. She'd still have bills to pay and responsibilities to handle, but something had shifted. Some door had opened that she'd thought was locked forever. "Maybe it did," Elena said, "or maybe I just finally let myself be who I was supposed to be all along." 3 months later, Elena was performing her second recital at a smaller venue downtown. The audience was different this time, more diverse, more like her. Working people who loved music, kids from her new community center class, church members who'd been supporting her for years. Sophia was there, of course, and Mr. Harrison, who had become both her mentor and her friend. Elena still worked at the concert hall, but only part-time now. The scholarship was paying for lessons with one of the best piano teachers in the city, and she'd started booking small performances here and there. Nothing fancy, nothing that would make her rich, but enough to let her dream feel real. As she sat down at the piano that night, she thought about 8-year-old Elena, pressing keys on Mrs. Chen's keyboard and imagining possibilities. She thought about 42-year-old Elena, too scared to hope, too tired to dream, and then she played for both of them, and for everyone who'd ever been told they didn't belong, proving that it's never too late to find your voice and make them listen.